Hey everyone. So this week we're going to go ahead and review Unit 2, which was Earth's history. After this presentation is over, you are going to have a Google form to answer some questions on. So make sure that you head back over to Google Classroom and look for that form that you can answer your questions. All right, so the first thing that we talked about in Unit 2 was plate tectonics. We talked about the theory of plate tectonics and we talked about continental drift. So basically, the theory of plate tectonics is that the outer rigid layer or the solid layer of the Earth, the lithosphere, is divided into a couple dozen different plates that move across the Earth's surface. Now, Alfred Wegener came up with the theory of continental drift, and that explains how continents shift position or they move across the Earth's surface. Um, it also described that instead of continents, the Earth was once a giant landmass named Pangaea, and we have a lot of evidence to back this theory up. So he claimed that at one time all of the continents were together. They fit together like, a puzzle. It was just one giant landmass, one big piece of land, and eventually over time they broke up and they drifted apart. So, like I said, we have a lot of evidence to back that up. Here are some pieces of evidence that back up the theory of continental drift. So, on the different continents, we found similar animal and plant fossils, and as we know, some animals can't swim or they can't fly. So, how in the world did these animals get on two different continents so far away? And the fossils were dated from the same time period. Same thing with plants. Plants can't get up and just walk across the water. So, how did these plant fossils that were so similar across the different continents get spread out like that? So, there were similar land masses. There were things like deserts and mountain chains that perfectly seemed to link together if you put the continents together. Similar types of soils and similar layers of soils found on the different continents. Similar geologic features. So I put that twice. Same thing as land masses. The continents fit together like a puzzle, and we know that the continents are still moving today. So that's some evidence to back up the theory of continental drift. Then we also learned about types of plate boundaries: convergent, divergent, and transform. The type of plate boundary that does not involve magma is transform, and we'll talk about that more in a second, but I, of course, wanted to play this video for you, so I'm going to go ahead and click on the link. All right, great job, Mom. All right, so back to our presentation. So convergent boundaries, here's a picture. Convergent boundaries are boundaries that come together. Divergent boundaries are plate boundaries that separate, and transform boundaries are boundaries that slide past each other. Now, when these plates push up against each other or separate or slide past each other, things happen, right? So when two plate boundaries come together, anytime plates move, they can make earthquakes, okay? When two plates come together, if it's a continental plate and a continental plate, two land plates crash together, that can form mountains. Volcanoes can also be formed at convergent boundaries as well. Usually volcanoes are made when a continental and an oceanic plate come together. Now what's going to happen there is something called subduction. And what's going to happen is that the oceanic plate will subduct underneath that continental plate because it's a lot more dense. Okay? Then we have divergent boundaries, which are two boundaries that are separating. Again, anytime plates move, earthquakes can happen. Also, with divergent boundaries, new crust can be formed. So when those plates separate, that allows magma to come up from the mantle and fill in that area that's now a gap. So that would form new crust. And then transform boundaries, that can make earthquakes, that can make faults, the big cracks in the ground. All right, moving on. Then we talked about the rock cycle. So remember, we have 5 different forms of rock. We have 3 types of rock, but we have 5 forms. So the 3 types are igneous, metamorphic, and sedimentary. But we also have sediment, which is little pieces of rock, and we have magma, which is molten rock inside of a volcano. Do you guys remember what it's called when the magma comes out of the volcano? It's lava, right? And then we have the processes that make the different rock. So remember, the arrows in the rock cycle represent the processes. And the processes that are in the rock cycle are melting and cooling, heat and pressure, compaction and cementation, and weathering and erosion. So for igneous rock, melting and cooling. For metamorphic, heat and pressure. And for sedimentary, compaction and cementation. Also weathering and erosion to make the sediment, right? So let's go ahead and take a look at a picture of the rock cycle. So right here, we wrote down the different forms of rock. We have igneous rock, we have sediment, which is little pieces of rock, we have sedimentary rock, we have metamorphic rock, and then we have magma. And then remember, the arrows represent the processes. In order to make metamorphic rock, we need heat and pressure. So notice, igneous rock can turn into metamorphic rock by heat and pressure. Sedimentary rock can turn into metamorphic rock by heat and pressure. Metamorphic rock can melt to make magma. Igneous rock can melt to make magma. If magma were to cool, it'll make igneous rock. Weathering and erosion can happen to any of these types of rocks to make sediment. If the sediments are compacted and cemented together, that's how we get sedimentary rock. Okay, I think I got them all. Yeah, I don't think I missed any. Okay, moving on to what we learned next, which was weathering and erosion. So if you remember, weathering is the breakdown of rock. That's making the rock into smaller pieces, and that can be done in many different ways. And we'll talk about that more in a second. I'll show you a picture. Erosion is the movement of rock, and that can also be done in many different ways. The 4 agents of erosion are wind, water, glaciers/ice, and gravity. So wind can blow the little pieces of rock away, water can sweep them away, same thing with glaciers and ice, and then gravity can pull little pieces of sediment down a hill, for example. Between weathering and erosion, weathering takes a lot longer. So let's look at this picture. So weathering is the process of breaking larger rocks into smaller ones. Erosion is the movement of the weathered rock and soil from one place to another. I know that we've pretty much mentioned that the agents of erosion are wind, ice, gravity, and water, but also weathering can be done by wind, ice, gravity, and water. So rock can be broken down by those things as well and moved around by those things. That's why in the center it says both. Okay, then we went ahead and we spent a little bit of time on soil formation, and we talked about soil or dirt is formed from weathering and erosion of rocks or parent material. So parent material meaning, like you have parents, we all have parents, we all have 2 people who brought us into this earth. Well, soil has parents who are rocks that now they're just little pieces of those larger rocks. So weathering and erosion happen to those larger rocks and turn them into soil. Soil is composed of 4 different things: minerals, organic matter, so that could be dead plants and animals, or old grass or leaves, or it could even be poop. And it's also composed of air and water. Soil takes a very long time to be made. So I have a picture for you. This is, a good estimate that soil is 25% air, 25% water, 45% mineral particles, which means those little pieces of rock, and then the rest of it is 5% organic matter. So the dead plants, the dead animals, so you see roots, organisms, decaying organisms, and then humus. And then at the bottom I put what humus is. Humus is the organic component of soil formed by the decomposition of leaves or other plant material by soil microorganisms. So decomposers are breaking down those dead leaves that fell on the ground. And that also helps to make up soil. All right, then we talked about fossils and the types of fossils. So fossils can be made by minerals being replaced, for example, petrification. Carbon, remember, all living things are made up of carbon, have a lot of carbon in them, so carbon can be left behind. Coal, molds and casts. Original remains could be fossilized, like in tar and amber, and also trace fossils. So poop can be fossilized, footprints can be fossilized. Um, Things like that. So here is a picture. So we have petrified fossils, and that is when the minerals are being replaced by other things. Molds is like an imprint. A cast is like basically the 3D version of that imprint. We have carbon, carbonization, the carbon is left over. We have trace fossils like footprints, and then they're hardened or they're fully preserved in like tar or ice or amber. Then we talked about the law of superposition. The law of superposition states that the oldest rock layer is at the bottom. So here's an example. We have letters A, B, C, and D. So what would be the oldest rock layer? The oldest rock layer would be D. The newest rock layer would be A. We then moved on to geologic time, and we talked about eras and eons and epochs. But the one that we focused on the most was eras. So far, we've gone through 4 eras: Precambrian, Paleozoic, Mesozoic, and Cenozoic. And the mnemonic device to remember that was purple pandas make crepes. The era that we're currently in is Cenozoic. Here's an example of a geologic time scale. So eons are the larger breakdown, and then eras make up eons, periods make up eras, and epochs make up periods. So right now, we are in the Phanerozoic eon of the Cenozoic era of the Quaternary period of the Holocene epoch. That's where we're at today. Okay? All right, so that's the end of the presentation. I have a little quote here because Miss Thomas and I, we miss you guys dearly, and we are incredibly sad that we're not with you and seeing your faces every day. Please believe that when I say this to you. We want nothing more than to be back at school with you and doing all the fun things that we promised that we were going to do. It really breaks our hearts. So we found a little quote that said, "My students make me feel proud. People always say that one person can't make a difference, but I have proof that these kids have made a difference. And you guys have made a difference in our lives. You bring smiles to our faces every day, even if we're online. So please keep up the good work. You're doing a great job." All right, that's enough with the mushy stuff because I'm gonna start tearing up. You do have an assignment to do, so you're gonna head back over to Google Classroom, the 6th grade all students Google Classroom, and you're gonna go to Google Forms. Um, it's posted on the same post as this, and you're gonna answer the few questions that I left there for you. Okay? All right, guys. Keep answering those daily questions, and I will see you back next Wednesday for another bigger assignment. Talk to you soon. Bye.